Hello again, friends. It's time for another In Other News. Maybe that's not an appropriate byline, though, since this is kind of front page news once again. Of course, I'm talking about North Korea. Whack-ass crazy, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, North Korea. Even though this might seem arrogant on my part and offensive, I'm actually just going to start referring to dear leader of North Korea as Kim Jong-Dumb. Let's entitle this one, Kim Jong-Dumb Sparking an Asian Arms Race. And that's why I call him dumb. I've seen a whole bunch of news stories here recently where pundits, analysts, of which I count myself just a mere professor pundit, but lots of different pundits and analysts are saying, oh, he's actually not dumb. The North Koreans aren't dumb. Everybody's saying they're insane, and that's not legitimate. This is a credible group of intellectuals who know exactly what they're doing, and they're plotting all these things strategically. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. BS. Because even if they are strategically plotting all of these threats to destroy the United States with nuclear arms and threats to kill all the South Koreans and threats to do all this stuff, if they're doing this in some sort of calculation to gain themselves status or gain themselves power or gain themselves more foreign aid or gain themselves whatever, it's all backfiring. So whether they're just full-on dumb or thinking they're smart, they're still dumb. And that's what I want to talk about is this idiot, for lack of a better word, Kim Jong-Dumb, is really starting to box himself and his entire country into a corner of no return that seems like it's going to end violently, and unfortunately, it's going to include the deaths of perhaps a whole bunch of South Koreans. And what I'm talking about is, from as an analytical perspective as I can, because we do get hot-blooded about these things, because these folks just throw out the most horrific threats. They're going to destroy the United States with nuclear arms, and everybody is expected to sit on their hands and act intellectual about it. Hey, we're humans. We get passionate. If somebody says you're going to kill 300 million of your citizens, you get a little hot and bothered under the collar, because if you don't, you're not human. But what I'm suggesting here is that they're boxing themselves into a corner that the dumb/smart/dumb North Korean leadership has not thought out. And I'm suggesting that these over-accentuated, nutbag, over-the-top, extremist statements about attacking and killing everybody is actually having the reverse effect of not scaring anybody, but quite frankly, making everybody become more scary themselves. And that's what I'm talking about with this possible arms race that we might now be seeing the inception of. Now, for sure, the United States has already responded. I mean, the United States has already flexed its muscle, done some B-2, B-52 missions, doing military drills, already planned in advance, military cooperation drills with South Korea. That was already on the books, already going to happen. Beefing up its presence, possibly in South Korea, possibly in Japan. Just moved missile defense shield component to Guam. I'm still not even sure what that means because I'm not even sure that the missile defense shield works. But I'm an idiot, okay? So the United States has flexed its muscle, and let's be perfectly clear. They have flexed their muscle not because the United States actually wants to do anything. Au contraire. The United States understands full well that the 10 million people living in the greater Seoul, South Korea area are the ones that are really at risk. The United States is not at risk. The North Koreans probably don't even have a nuclear weapon, and if they probably do, they probably don't have a delivery device to even get it to Alaska. They certainly aren't going to invade America, so there's no real risk to Americans. The risk lies with them, the North Koreans doing something crazy to South Korea. So we're very worried about this, and the United States is flexing its muscles, not as a show of force because it wants to invade North Korea and thus trigger the deaths of millions of South Koreans. It's flexing its muscles to reassure South Korea that we will be there to back them up. It's flexing our muscles to reassure the Japan, we will be there to back you up if anything happens. And again, to flex a little bit of the muscle to North Korea saying, hey, we're here to back up our friends if you guys go too batshit crazy, which are awfully close right now. The arms race thing is new, and this has just started to trickle out in the last 48 hours. But it makes perfectly logical sense given what's going on. Oh, by the way, I just looked over my shoulder. I opened the window because welcome to Blacksburg in the spring. It's March 4th. Springtime. Back to the arms race. In the last 48 hours, it is becoming clearer, that both South Korea and Japan are rethinking their nuclear programs. Yeah, think about that, Kim Jong-Dumb. So you want to make all these threats to America, but you can't really do anything to America, and America knows this. But so do South Korea and Japan. But South Korea and Japan do know that they are the likely targets of mass destruction. So South Korean leaders and Japanese leaders, and this is something they have thought about over the years. It's not sudden that they're suddenly changing their mind. But lots of politicians, lots of pundits, lots of folks in both of these countries have for years said, you know, it's nice that the United States has our back. It's great. And it's nice that there are, 50,000 or 50 to 80,000 U.S. troops in Japan and South Korea combined. And it's nice that the United States is sending additional warships. But you know what would be nicer? If we had a shit ton of nuclear bombs, because then for sure North Korea would not attack us. Again, it's the whole ideology of nuclear armament, that it's a much better deterrent. It's not really that you want one so that you can go attack people. It's that you want one to assure that no one will attack you. And right now, more people in South Korea and Japan are saying, maybe we should have one of those. Because crazy North Korea will have to definitely think twice before they mess with us if they know that we have more nuclear weapons than them. And here's the deal. The South Koreans, for years, nay, decades, have talked about reprocessing spent fuel from nuclear reactors the same way that Iran does, the same way that North Korea does, reprocessing it to enrich it so that it would be bomb-grade material. That's not even new either. The United States, for their part, has said for decades, hey, don't do that. The United States official policy is, look, we don't want any more nuclear weapons on the planet. We don't want any more nuclear-armed countries, even our friends. We don't want them to be nuclear-armed. So the United States actually plays a very heavy role in South Korean, and I assume Japanese policy, in terms of reprocessing for enrichment to arms-grade, plutonium, uranium, whatever that stuff is. I ain't a scientist. Fission, fusion, it's all bombs to me. I know it's really not for those of you that are smarter. But they're starting to talk about it again. For the last couple years, the South Koreans have actually said, hey, we need to renegotiate that whole thing where we said decades ago that we would not do this. It's for decent reasons, too. The South Koreans have, I believe, 21 nuclear reactors. I don't even know how many Japan has. It's more than 21. And so you have a whole lot of leftover fuel, or spent fuel, I should say. And you have to do something with it. You can't just bury it in the backyard. So these two countries are starting to suggest, definitely the South Koreans, we need to enrich this stuff to do something else with it, to move it out of the way. And we have a ton of it. So we want to enrich it. And now, given current events, more people in South Korea are saying, why don't we just enrich it to have a bomb? Because we can eliminate this North Korean threat in a big way. I don't mean eliminate them by eliminating the North Koreans. I'm saying eliminate the threat. If South Korea were to have 50 nuclear bombs, I dare say North Korea wouldn't be as blustery as it is right now. Again, I'm against nuclear armament too, but facts are facts, and we're just being pragmatic here. If you had 50 nuclear weapons, I don't think Kim Jong-Dumb would be as dumb as he's being. Because South Korea would be like, oh yeah, sure, send a missile over to Seoul and see what happens 1 millisecond later. Now, we assume that the United States will have their back if anything happens, but you understand where it's a much more powerful thing to say, no, we have it. We have our finger on the button right now. You want to play this game, North Korea? So more people in South Korea are thinking about this. Lo and behold, it came up yesterday. The South Koreans said, hey, remember when we've been talking about renegotiating that treaty? We need to start talking about that right this second. Like right this second. It has been whispered that people in Japan are starting to talk about it too. They, of course, have a constitutional clause which says we cannot attack a country. We only have a defensive force, not an offensive force. And in that spirit, why would you ever need a nuclear weapon? So we're not going to develop any atomic or nuclear weapons either. They're starting to rethink this too. And it's scary. Here's the scary part. And these are more scientific-based kind of scary stuff. South Korea, North Korea's cuckoo. They have a few nuclear reactors that may or may not be doing anything. They may or may not have a significant enough of enriched plutonium to put into their may or may not exist bombs that may or may not be carried anywhere because they may or may not have a rocket program. In other words, North Korea don't got much, and we're not sure they got any. Let's counter that, just looking at the science here. South Korea and Japan are both big nuclear energy countries. We already said South Korea has over 20 nuclear plants. I guess, I'm assuming Japan is like 100. I don't know. I'm just making that up. It's a lot. And they've been operating for nuclear energy purposes. And they've been operating these things for a long time. These folks aren't strangers to nuclear technology. And they have access to hell tons of spent fuel that they have the technology to enrich to bomb grade. They're not even poking around on the internet looking for the formula. These guys know how to do it. These are some of the most intelligent, sophisticated, and technologically advanced countries on planet Earth. It's not a secret. They know how to do it. Let me add on one other little scientific fact. Both of those countries could also easily figure out how to make a bomb out of it. In fact, I think that is on the internet. Making a atomic or nuclear weapon is not a state secret. It's simply a matter of, do you have the technology to do it? South Korea, yes. Japan, yes. Do you have the fuel to do it? South Korea, yes, or possibly could very quickly. Japan, yes, or possibly could very quickly. Do you have the will to do it? And that is where we're not sure. South Korea, maybe. Japan, maybe. And they may be accelerating that fast, given current events. Thus, we may be seeing the beginnings of an Asian nuclear arms race, thanks in part, if not in full, to Kim Jong-Dumb. And if and when their crazy-ass rhetoric, which, again, no one's sure what they think they're getting out of it, but at the end of the day, if it goes this route, what they're going to get out of it is a nuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and the entire Northeast Asian region, of which North Korea will be vastly outnumbered by nuclear weapons all around them. China's already got nuclear weapons, obviously. So this is a terrible, terrible situation that Kim Jong-Dumb is now the catalyst for. Let me finish with this. Who's the big loser in all this? Let's go back to China. China cannot be happy about any of these developments. In fact, nay, I will say it, they have to be pissed off about these developments. This does not bode well for China. Why? Because the United States is upping its presence all around this region, and it's harder and harder for China to question why. It's harder and harder for China to challenge it, because China's not dumb. They're not as dumb as North Korea. China understands the situation like, well, of course the U.S. is going to beef up their presence. We can't even really complain about that. Why else is China not happy about this? South Korea and Japan, technologically advanced, rich, with access and the technology to get nuclear weapons, are U.S. allies. Democracies and U.S. allies that are right beside China. So, again, in 20, 30, 50, 100 years, and China does, by the way. U.S. policymakers never think more than 6 weeks in advance. China thinks 6 decades out. This is not happy times in China for a brand new administration who's looking at the prospect of 50 years out, all countries surrounding them being allies of the United States and possibly nuclear armed. North Korea, one way or the other, is going to implode in on itself or start a war that then the outside world will help it implode in on itself with bombs. North Korea is a temporary wacko state that can't be sustained for much longer. China's forever. South Korea, hopefully forever. Japan forever. U.S. forever. These other entities are the ones that China's thinking about, not North Korea, and they can't be happy that cuckoo North Korea is now causing them a tremendous thorn in their side in the immediate and long-term future. That it's now getting impossible for China to try to say, hey, U.S., don't do that. We're going to consider that an act of provocation against us if you guys do this. They can't even say that anymore because China is smart and they're like, yeah, we'd be doing the same thing. Yeah, if some crazy state was threatening us, we'd be doing the same thing. If some crazy state was threatening an ally of ours, we'd be doing the same thing. And again, to finish, I think it's the most fascinating part of this whole escalation of tension on the Korean Peninsula, the most fascinating part is the silence of China, which to me means I think that there's no doubt they're not going to help North Korea out of this, especially if it gets hot. It looks increasingly like China will probably work with the surrounding countries, including the United States, to further contain, isolate, and possibly dismantle the North Korean regime. Because now the North Korean regime has become a tremendous liability to China. It used to be an asset. Back in the day, it used to be an asset. China would use North Korea's craziness to unbalance Japan or unhinge South Korea, U.S. allies, to keep the U.S. on their toes. Ha! Don't mess with us. We got our crazy little cousin over here who might do something crazy. North Korea used to be an asset. It is definitely in the liability column for China now, and China's thinking hard about, what are we going to do about this? The long-term implications for an arms race in this part of the world are bad, and they're bad mostly for China. They're really bad for North Korea short-term because it's going to get them all annihilated. But it's worse for China long-term. Think about that, Kim Jong-Dumb. And for the rest of you, think a little deeper than the headlines and the implications for all the surrounding countries in the longer term, not just after this current craziness calms down or possibly goes to war. Let's hope not, for the sake of our South Korean allies. That's all for now. Got any questions, comments, concerns about that? Are you slightly offended by me calling him Kim Jong-Dumb? As I've said before, I'll face off with him man to man in the street at any given time. I also would do the same for Vladimir Putin, only because I would consider it a badge of honor to be taken out by a judo chop by Vladimir Putin. But I will take down Kim Jong-Dumb any place, any time. And I would rather me, Chuck Norris, or Pierce Brosnan posing as 007 take out Kim Jong-un than this escalate to a full-fledged war between states, because that's not going to end well for anybody. But for now, we're out.